Last week, we talked about how we were going to cover properties that we own that either are a one-family or two-family rental property. We talked about contracts being important. Sometimes people don't think that a contract is really necessary when it comes to just renting it out to one family or two families, but it is very important. It spells out who's responsible for what. And that way, when you write the insurance policy, you know who needs to have what coverage. So when you're doing that, you want to make sure, okay, who's responsible to repair things? Who's responsible to replace items like dishwashers, refrigerators, washers and dryers, the furnace, the air conditioning unit? Who's responsible for those things? The other thing that's very important is who takes care of the maintenance of the property, the mowing of the yard, the removal of the ice and snow. These are very important for liability exposures, and you want to make sure that you spell that out in the contract. The other thing that's important is to make sure that you have liability limits set properly on your policy when you own the building. Because even when you are not the one inviting people onto the property, things can happen, and because you own it, you could be added in a lawsuit. So you want to make sure that you cover your liability exposure. You want to make sure that you're covering the dwelling. You are responsible for the dwelling itself, which means anything permanently affixed. You want to make sure that you have that covered on your policy. And you also want to make sure that you make it a requirement that that person living in the unit has a renter's policy. That way, their items, their liability exposure is covered on their policy. You should never be responsible for somebody else's personal property. And you want to make sure that the liability is covered for those people inviting people onto your property first, and then comes to your second. So if you own a 1 to 2 family dwelling, let's have a conversation and make sure that you have the proper coverage and that we make sure you're on pace to make sure that everything is covered for you and that liability exposure moving forward.